Hi everyone, Daljeet Peterson here from astrolab21.com. This video we're going to talk about Virgo season 2022, which is beginning for us here on August 22nd with the sun moving into the sign of Virgo after spending a month in the sign of Leo. And before we get into Virgo season, I do want to look back on a few of the things we discussed in the last video on Leo season, which I called A Call of Destiny. And the reason we titled that video that was because of a pretty significant transit that was occurring on August 1st, where we had Mars, Uranus, and the North Node all conjunct in the sign of Taurus. And this seemed to be a kind of a culmination point of a series of conjunctions that Mars has made with all the outer planets throughout all of this calendar year of 2022. And when I started looking at the year and I did my year preview, I thought that was going to be a pretty significant series of conjunctions that would unfold over the course of the year as Mars conjunct first Pluto back in the spring, and then encountered Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, and then culminated with its conjunction of Uranus that occurred last month. And pretty significant cycle if we look at these Mars conjunctions and all the events that unfolded in concurrence with those transits. And I want to look at some of the current events that did occur under this transit with the caveat and the sort of mantra. If you follow this channel, I always say that astrology is archetypally predictive, not concretely predictive. And this is a concept that I'm borrowing from the author Richard Tarnas, whose book Cosmos and Psyche is just a fantastic sort of treatise on the outer planets and all of the transits, the world transits, and how they seem to affect historical events. And so when we looked at this significant transit of Mars, Uranus, North Node, it had this archetypal configuration that would predict certain things. So I want to take a look at one of the slides that we showed during the last video and see if we can correlate to a couple of things that happened almost exactly on that date, which I think is pretty interesting. So I'm going to jump in and share my screen here. And here I have the title for this season, Virgo season 2022, Move to Improve. We'll get into Virgo season, but first I just want to step back, and here's a slide from last month's video about the energies, the archetypal configuration of Mars and Uranus, and some of the qualities that exist. And as usual, I like to use sort of the light and the dark qualities of each of these archetypes when they blend. So, you know, on the left side, we have some of the more lighter or beneficial qualities to these two planets, right? It's just like yang, enthusiastic, adventurous, courage, sudden breakthroughs, erotic emancipation, all of these things associated with these two archetypes. But you can also get excessive will, reckless audacity, impulsive, rash action, sudden military strikes, which I think is interesting, and unfettered sexuality. This occurred with the North Node exactly on August 1st. And a couple of things happened right on that day. And the day previous, on July 31st, the CIA launched a drone missile attack on the terrorist Zawahiri with this precision, high-tech assassination of that wanted terrorist, which really just, you know, we just showed the graphic, right? Sudden military strikes. This was a very Mars and Uranus type of activity. It's an aggressive military action, violent, you know, an assassination that leveraged very high-tech assets in terms of that precision ability to use drone missile strikes, which is a very Uranian quality. So there we saw Mars and Uranus, the archetypes, right, configured quite explicitly and concretely in those world events. The other thing that was occurring during that week was this sort of surprise announcement that the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, was going to add a visit to Taiwan on her Southeast or South Asia tour that she was making, a diplomatic tour, which caused an incredible amount of controversy at the time, right? And it had also these qualities of Mars Uranus. It was suddenly announced. It had a very disruptive quality. She seemed to be acting in a very direct and bold, audacious sort of diplomatic maneuver, which was sort of breaking with the tradition. I don't think anyone's visited Taiwan at that level I think Newt Gingrich in the 90s was the last one to make such a visit. So it was seen as a bold move and aggressive. It was in the name of, the democratic liberation movement in Taiwan, a very Uranian quality. And of course, the immediate aftermath and response of the Chinese government was to start doing military exercises in the waters off of Taiwan, a very aggressive, sudden Mars-Uranus activity. So in these events, you can see how this is configured. Now, of course, as I always say, I'm not saying that did the Uranus-Mars conjunction cause these events to happen? No, but they are archetypally predictive of the concrete events that will happen, right? These configure how things can unfold. And I think this is the key to using astrology as a predictive tool, both in looking at how the world works, how we work as individuals, how our relationships and our own personal world is unfolding. These energies are present. This is what the observation and correlation of these major cycles helps us with. It's, we've been observing these things for, in the case of the inner planets, for millennia. In case of the outer planets, we only have, a few hundred years of data on them, but they are starting to show us these archetypal dimensions that seem to occur on cyclical bases, I guess I should say, right? So anytime Mars comes into conjunction with Uranus, we can start to observe, okay, what is this energy constellating, right? And it's interesting, the last time we had Mars-Uranus conjunct was January of 2021. I think we all know what happened at that time, right? The January 6th attack on the Capitol. Now, it wasn't exact on January 6th. I think it was within about 6 or 7 degrees of orb, but it was within effect, right? This sudden, eruptive, violent action. And we talked about that a lot at the time. We also had Saturn and Uranus involved in that. But, we can start to see a pattern here as we look backwards. What is this archetypal configuration? And so now we can also use it to look forward. The next time that Mars and Uranus will be conjunct will be in July of 2024. So can we expect some sudden, violent, disturbing, disruptive type of actions to occur in the next couple of years at that time? Stay tuned. But that's how we use astrology. So I thought that'd be interesting as a way of sort of showing how these things show up, right? These archetypes, these astrological cyclical configurations, and how we can interact with them. And by using and understanding these techniques, it helps us to interpret and to navigate the world, I think, in a more integrated and holistic way. So that said, let's move forward and keep going into what we have coming up, which is Virgo season. And there's just, again, before getting into it, some of the qualities of Mars and Uranus that we discussed last month. Again, if you follow this channel, which I hope you do, I do love using these word clouds. They're just great ways of stimulating in me. I really get the archetypal sense of what's going on and all the possibilities. It's never just one thing, right? You can start to almost meditate on these visuals and get a sense of what gets constellated when these two energies are combined in such a powerful way as they are with a conjunction, right? That Mars aggression, which can be rageful, which can be violent and selfish, connected with that revolutionary impulse of Uranus, right? You can get chaos and upheaval, right? Chaos and rage, rageful chaos. You can get, headstrong, radical, nonconformist energies, that potency and virility. Is it going to bring out Uranus's, liberating qualities, or is it going to bring out more of its eccentric and sort of chaotic energies? All of those energies are co-present when these archetypes are in conjunction. And so we have the ability to use these energies for our own personal transformation and development. How are we going to use this energy? And so as we move now into Virgo season, we can contemplate what it is to be of the Virgo archetype. What is this month unfolding for us as the sun moves through Virgo, right? And whatever the sun is in the solar year, it's shining its light on that archetype, and it's sort of wearing that archetype, almost like the sun puts on a different almost like a different costume every month as it moves through these 12 zodiacal signs. So this month, the sun's dressed up in Virgo, which means it's going to be rather neatly attired, a very perfect and impeccable presentation, as Virgo is known for, right? It has all these qualities of being very discerning and particular and precise and meticulous. It's all about the details. It's all about the fine print, right? It's a earth sign. It's a mutable earth sign, right? And it's ruled by Mercury. So this gives us the feeling of what Virgo is. It's yin in its essence, which is important, right? It has that feminine receptive quality that all of the earth signs share, but it also has this mutability. It wants to change. It wants to, the most important, I think, phrase for Virgo is to improve and to serve. Improves and serves, wants to be of service. We often associate Virgo with the idea of the humble servant, the virgin, right? That is really there to improve. Now, it gets a reputation as being sort of critical and nitpicky, right? That's a Virgo quality, but it's always in the service of improvement. And I always remind myself of that when I'm thinking or dealing with Virgo people or Virgo situations. Like, what is the deep desire here? It's to improve. So, of course, a Virgo season is always a good time to reflect on what can we improve about ourselves, about our own, rules like the day-to-day habits. What are the routines that we can improve on? It's always a good time of year to sort of revamp any sort of diet and exercise programs, any sort of personal self-improvement. It also is associated with our sense of vocation, right? Part of that service is, what is the skill that each of us has as individuals that we bring to the world? And Virgo really encourages us to develop, to hone, to constantly be improving that skill set so that we can be of service, so that we can, offer, our gifts to the world. That's really a part of this archetype, I think, at its highest expression. Of course, it also has that shadow side where it can be hypercritical and sort of a negative, nitpicking, sort of pessimistic quality to it, which can come from the sense of an expert and the expertise, right? Once you start to see things in a certain way, that Virgoan quality, when you get that laser-like focus that it brings, sometimes all you can see is the flaws, and you tend to get hypercritical. But when you work with this archetype at a deeper level, I think you can start to embrace its more, it's the quality of humility, which I think is essential to working with this archetype in a successful way. So let's now jump into the charts and take a look at what's in store for us here on the skies under Virgo season. Starting with the chart for, as I said, on August 22nd, we had the sun, which made its ingress, as we say, into the sign of Virgo. Here it was at 0 degrees Virgo, and beginning Virgo season for us. And we have another pretty significant configuration coming up during this Virgo season, and it's going to start on August 25th. It's going to be in effect, I think, from between August 25th and the end of this month, through about the 29th through the 31st, is going to be the most probably intense period during this whole cycle, this whole Virgo season. And what we're getting here, and I want to highlight, is what we would call a fixed grand cross. And it's interesting here on this day in particular, it's going to involve Venus particularly, and it's also conjunct the moon here in Leo. And that's forming a square to the nodal axis as well as Uranus. And then we also have Saturn in the same kind of square coming at us from Aquarius. And of course, that means that Venus is in opposition to Aquarius. And so all of these planets are in the fixed signs of the zodiac, and this is what we would call a fixed grand cross, right? And so all of these planetary energies become involved in this configuration. And, whenever you have that much energy, archetypally speaking, it tends to really show up. We feel these kinds of energies on a personal, individual level. They show up in our relationships, in our families, in our society, our community, the workplace, our our immediate environment, and of course, as we demonstrated on the world stage. So everyone is susceptible to these energies as they commingle. The true use of, again, astrology is how do we navigate them? What is this presenting for us in terms of our own personal evolution, our own self-transformation, and how do we help to navigate these energies as they're affecting everyone around us? Of course, they always, it's a personal thing. Where you have these planets in your own birth chart is going to greatly inform how you might tend to work with these energies. But let's just take a look at what is presented for us here in this configuration and what this might portend, what you're going to feel, right? And of course, I really think whenever we have Venus in Leo, this is a really sensuous and expressive Venus. It's really giving us the permission to let our hair down and just have fun, to really do the things that we love, that we enjoy, that give us great individual pleasure. It's just the act of creativity, be that of an erotic or sexual nature, be that of an artistic nature, being that dealing in a playful way, interactions with children. These are the childlike qualities that we have. These are all Leo qualities. And just like the sun is wearing Virgo during this month, during this transit, Venus is wearing Leo. So our own inner sensual nature is putting on that Leo costume of being very expressive and energetic and passionate, right? A lot of passions being evoked. Now, this energy of self-indulgence, in a way, it could be a very self-indulgent quality, particularly, if you have Leo, sun, moon, or rising, you're really going to feel this, and you're going to really want to indulge in your own senses, your own sensuality, your own creative process. It's a very subjective type of energy, right? Well, of course, this is coming into conflict with its opposition from Saturn in Aquarius. Almost antithetical energy, where Saturn, as it's been moving through Aquarius since late 2020, right? We're in the midst of its 2.5-year journey through this sign. Much slower moving energy, a much more methodical, plodding, right? Saturn is all about, wherever Saturn is, it's where we're being called to focus our energy, to really get disciplined, to get narrow. Here in Aquarius, it's really focusing on the other, focusing on how do we improve society? How do we progressively integrate new forms of thinking and ideals and actions in the world that can benefit all of humankind? It's a very unselfish and rather objective. It's the most objective in many ways of all the signs, right? Aquarius is a fixed air sign, very high-minded ideals, right? So here we see the tension of opposites, and this is what's built into this beautiful zodiacal wheel. All of the opposite signs have a mutuality that calls us to integrate, right? We're being called to integrate any opposition. So here with Saturn being very objective, rational, versus Venus being very subjective, personal, expressive, tension, right? So how do we integrate that? And we're going to feel that during this week. You may feel your own desire nature to just do your thing. I want to just do it. I don't give a hoot about what anyone thinks. I really want to be involved in my own expressive, creative process, whatever that may be. You may feel some resistance from your partners, from your family, from your bosses and coworkers, from some obligation to your community or the world that you're in. Some social media pressure, right? You can see that play out with this Aquarius, Saturn versus Venus, Leo tension, right? So just be aware of that, and you'll see it show up in the world. You'll see it show up in events. But this gets complicated even further by both of these being in square to Uranus and the North Node, okay, which we already talked about. That was a big event last month when Mars was also here. But this part of the sky is continuing to be activated. And this is starting to separate a little bit. The nodes move backwards, of course, but it's still pretty close, right? That date with destiny is still in effect. And with any transit with the outer planets, they tend to have a much longer influence, right? It's not just at the exact moment where something's, often they are concrete, but in our personal development, sometimes we find that it's like something, there's an insight that's gleaned at the moment of the conjunction or the whatever the aspect is, but then it tends to, as it moves and separates, we get more clarity on it. So whatever did occur during that last month, if you had some major personal insight, and I'd love to hear that in the comments, if anyone did have anything personal during that transit around, you know, the 31st, the 1st, the 2nd of last month, what showed up for you? Did some of this, you know, archetypal configuration affect you concretely, and how so? But that's still in effect, and that energy now is being sort of diverted between these other two energies, between Saturn and Venus in Taurus, another fixed sign. So we've got fixed Earth, right, conflicting with the fixed fire of Leo and Venus, like that passion, that desire just to really just be in the moment with our creativity, with our expression, with our desire nature. Getting that fixed air, Aquarius and Saturn, of being very rigid and really wanting us to focus and stay objective and be very clear-minded about things and be considerate of the other and the whole, not be selfish, to be selfless, right? Conflicting with Uranus is incredibly disruptive and powerful energy to radically change any situation through that fixed Earth of Taurus, through the body, through this desire nature, and through experiencing things in an embodied way, which has been a theme that we've been discussing on this channel all year with the North Node moving through a Taurus, right? This is about a year of really embodying our wisdom, really taking the past, that South Node in Scorpio, and embodying it, and ecologies of practice that are much more grounded in physical, the sensations, and in the here and now, and the grounding in the practical. So all these energies now are being, this is a very complex pattern that we're dealing with, and this will be in effect, as I said, starting with that configuration on the 25th and through the rest of this week. So just be aware of that and start to work with, you know, how are we going to integrate this? Now what completes this square, just before we move on from this, is we have the South Node here in Scorpio, which is the fixed water piece of this puzzle, right? So now we're getting into our emotional power. What gives us that, you know, I always think of Scorpio as this emotional dynamo, right? It's gathering into itself that the feeling nature, the depth of experience, really wanting to go as deep as possible in all of our interactions and relationships. And as we've been talking about on this channel all year, right, with that South Node there, there's a lot of emotional healing we're being called to during this period, during that 18th month cycle of the nodes. And so, you know, and it's also like the spiritual signature that the South Node has. And I feel like if we, at its best, we're being called to sort of heal and let go of some old emotional wounding. This could be a symbol of the patterns of behavior that we tend to use or have that are habitual and can often be self-limiting or self-sabotaging, right? What is the story we've been telling ourselves that's preventing us from moving forward in a more embodied and grounded way, right? This dynamic between the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical material. It's a major theme of 2022 and into 2023 that we're being called to explore. And anytime we get the nodes triggered by one of these major aspects, as we're getting now, there's there's an intensity to that mission. And so wherever Scorpio and Taurus fall for you in your personal chart, that's probably going to be where it's showing up. And so knowing your own chart will help you with navigating where these energies are coming from. So I'll always encourage you to reference this back to your own chart. If you're not familiar with it, get yourself a reading with a good astrologer and learn. And, you know, as always, I'll refer you to my own blueprint series, The Blueprint of the Soul, which will help teach you how to read your own chart. So important and so helpful in navigating and using this amazing tool. So that's a pretty intense configuration there. Let's move forward because, and it's all taking place, as I said, there's a week of real intense action. If we go to just a few days later, on the 26th and into the 27th, we're going to get the Virgo new moon here occurring at about 3 degrees of Virgo. So very early in Virgo season, we get a new lunation cycle, and as always, new moons, great times to set new intentions. And here, and as always on every lunar cycle, if we can align those intentions with the qualities of the sign, in this case Virgo, we have a better chance of really instantiating those and making them come to fruition. So again, the Virgo themes, improvement, right? What were we talking about with Virgo? Intelligence, helpfulness, being practical, a sincerity. It can lead to some, there's some self-reflective and self-critical nature, analytical, really being called to really review, and we'll talk about this later on because we're going to get into Mercury Retrograde, but to get back into the nitty-gritty of things. It's to be self-reflective. There's that fault-finding quality, that skepticism, that sense of precise discernment, getting organized, right? This is a great time to, as I often say, to Marie Kondo your life, right? How can I really start to get more critical of the things and the people and the relationships, the patterns, the routines that I'm involved in? Good time for self-examination. Good time to do some, physical and mental, emotional, and spiritual house cleaning during this month. And so any intentions you set along those lines during this new moon will be well aligned with the unfoldment of the lunar cycle as the month progresses. So encourage you to explore that. Moving back to the chart here. So that's, again, this is all during this week when this grand fixed cross is in effect. This will just start to, you'll really get a feeling of, this brings that Virgo aspect into the other configuration, a mutability, which will be nice, a sense of breaking maybe some of the log jams of these fixed square positions that we may find ourselves in. During that new moon, you may feel the desire to sort of let go a little bit of some of your most held and precious positions, especially your ideas, right? That sense of that Virgo mentality as it's ruled by Mercury, and to really be more self-reflective during the rest of the month and see where that takes you. Now I want to look at another configuration that's going to be coming up during, it really comes into effect on August 29th. And this again involves the planet Venus. Venus is forming what we call a yod with Pluto and Neptune. And this is often called in the astrological literature the finger of God or the finger of fate. And this is a really interesting aspect where one planet is in conjunct. It's in this awkward position with two other planets who are themselves in a rather harmonious position. So this is a long-standing sort of configuration between Pluto and Neptune. The two slowest moving outer planets have been in sextile. They're 60 degrees apart. They're two signs apart, which are always going to create a sort of harmonious thing. They're always going to be a complementary element. In this case, earth and water, right? Pluto's being in the earth sign of Cap, and Neptune in the water sign of Pisces. Those are, and these signs that are two apart are always complementary, harmonious, which gives us the sextile aspect. And this is like, I've called this the aspect of the century. They've been in sextile for almost 100 years or so. But any time a planet comes into a position that's here as Venus is, which is between these two planets in conjunct, which means that they are not of like element. Being in a fire sign in Leo, Venus cannot relate to either the water of Neptune or to the earth of Pluto. Those are incompatible elements, right, at that elemental energetic level. So this is going to be seen, we talked about Venus and Leo as being sort of the sense of self-indulgence, of getting involved in our own creative, expressive process, that desire nature taking us over, the Venusian, the beautiful, the sublime, coming into a real difficult alignment with these two outer planets. And again, Venus being very personal and subjective, and these two planets being sort of the extra personal, right? The transcendental energies. This almost has the sense of the ego being overwhelmed by powerful transpersonal forces that we're incapable of sort of resisting or dealing with. You just feel this overwhelm. It's so interesting. My partner and I were hiking last weekend in the forest here in Connecticut, where we've relocated to. And she had this kind of experience where she just got this downloading, overwhelmed feeling of a deep sadness in the forest and a loneliness. And as we went through, there was a nature center that revealed that these forests here had been clear cut for the charcoal industry during the Revolutionary and Civil War times. All of the cannons and guns made, all the iron. This place is known for having great iron ore deposits, so they made a lot of iron furnaces were here, and those furnaces were fueled by all the trees that were burned and clear cut to make charcoal to fire the furnaces. So we found out all the forest here is only 100 years old. And so what she was feeling was that incredible sadness of the forest, of having been denuded of its old growth. And there was, in terms of geological time, right, 100 years isn't a lot of time for reforestation, even though you look around here and it's just, trees as far as the eye can see. But this is that kind of energy of the overwhelm of the senses, especially Venus, and those more intuitive yin-like essences, the feminine qualities, the receptivity to the planet and the ecology. Overwhelming, right? So you may have that kind of experience under the influence of this configuration, which I said, August 29th, but this whole week, our Venusian functions are going to be coming under intense pressure. We're really going to be forced to get in tune with what it is you really want and desire, what gives you comfort, what gives you joy, what gives you satisfaction. And to take ownership of that, Leo, to really embody it and to play the role, to really embrace it, if you will. But a lot of other energies are conflicting with that, right? With Neptune and Pisces, this desire for almost this transcendental energy, like to let go of all of your personal ego, subjective desires, and to submit to the sublime will of the universe, along with something like Pluto in Capricorn, which is this almost subterranean desire for power, for for finding your place in the world, right? Capricorn, with that Pluto energy, which can be just also overwhelming in its use of force and power to transform the structures of our lives. So we could be getting these kind of senses of the world conspiring against us, the structure of our lives being overwhelmed by forces out of our control. A restructuring of the company we work for, and suddenly we find ourselves out of a job, or having to relocate, or just the challenges of navigating any of the systems we interface with. The political system, the information system, the medical system, the banking system, right? You can just feel a sense of overwhelm by some of these forces. So just be aware that that's taking place archetypally, and get in touch with. This is one of those things that you really can't do much about. There's not a way. That's why it's the finger of God, or the finger of fate. Things just seem to happen to us under these configurations. Now, the good news is it's fairly short-lived. This is only going to last a couple of days in and around this date. So as we move into September and later into Virgo season, we're going to feel a relief of this pressure. And then we'll see, Venus will move into Virgo later in the month, be an entire change of that tone. It's going to put on the Virgo costume for a couple weeks. And then that Virgo energy following on the new moon will start to take on a much more sensual quality, if you will. All right, the last thing I want to talk about is coming up this month is we're going to move into the last Venus retrograde phase, which will begin starting on September 9th or the 10th, where we're going to see that Mercury is going to retrograde. This is going to be the third and final retrograde cycle of 2022, and has been happening in all of these retrogrades. They've been starting in the air signs and then retrograding back into Earth, right? We had the first one in Aquarius move back, and then we had the next one in Gemini move back into Taurus. Now we're going to get a retrograde as Mercury is moving through Libra at the beginning, and as it stations retrograde, it's going to back up and end up its retrograde period in Virgo. So we're going to get a period where we'll have, we talked about this last time too. Actually, it's going to occur the next Mercury phase where it conjuncts the Sun at 0 degrees Libra, and part of that retrograde cycle and initiating a new Mercury phase. I think we talked about this a little bit last month too when we looked at the phases of Mercury. So if you haven't watched that video, it might be worth just refreshing on that. But so, and this is really the start of Libra season, so we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, and we'll talk about this more in the next video for next month. But this period of the retrograde in the second half of Virgo season, as Mercury retrogrades through Libra, it's really going to be a renewal of a lot of our relationship energy. We're going to be looking and reflecting on what's been occurring for us in our relationship dynamics, Libra, over the course of most recently, right, as it was moving forward through the sign, and just in general. So when we get these retrograde periods, always a good time to sort of pull back, right? And anything that Mercury rules, right, as I say, it's our de facto communications director of our chart and of the zodiac. Anything associated with Mercury, which is, anything to do with the mental and communication, like it's always associated with contracts, it's associated with travel and shorter journeys, it's associated with siblings, things of that nature, our immediate environment, our neighborhoods. Not a good time to start anything new in any of those areas. So you never want to, if you can avoid it, sign any new contract or any long-term commitment under a Mercury retrograde. Get into a contract that's binding in some sort of relationship, whether it's a business relationship or otherwise. Might be, if you can wait until later in the month when Mercury moves direct, be a better time. Instead, be reviewing, right, any of that information, knowing those documents, your travel plans, sort of going over everything, reading the fine print, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, that sort of thing. Helpful to do during that period. And then it won't be until well into Libra season before Mercury starts to move direct again, and will sort of carry us into the next phase, and we can then go back into those contracts, go back into those relationships with a new sense of perspective, having the confidence to know that we've eliminated anything that could have potentially been problematic for us, right? And again, we'll get into that Virgo archetype. We'll be really looking critically at the details inside the numbers. What is the data telling us, right? So you may find yourself, again, great time to really get all of your houses in order, to spring clean all of those phases, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever that means for you. And of course, where's Virgo in your chart, right? I know for me, I have it on my 10th house, so all things involving my career will be coming under great scrutiny during this time. So I'll be sort of aware of that, focused on what am I being called to restructure, to revamp, what are the contracts and obligations I have in the world, and how can I improve upon my systems that allow me to be in the world, that all those 10th house things, right? So this is how we use this tool. And again, I encourage you to really learn your own blueprint, and refer to the series I've done here on YouTube. I also have a series of articles on Medium on the blueprint of the soul, really helping you to learn how to use astrology for your own benefit and your own self-transformation and personal evolution. So that's kind of it. I think that's what I wanted to cover for this video. Yeah, that's a big thing to digest. So hopefully that's helpful for you, help you sort of navigate the energies that are coming your way. As always, if this video is helpful to you, if you liked it, if you can hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Would love to have you part of the Astrolab 21 community here. And yeah, till next time, Satanam, everyone.